Good evening. I'd like to call this subcommittee meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission to order. It is Thursday, May 8th. We are online on Zoom. And I will ask, let me see, Mr. Santos.
Good evening here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Ms. Salsi.
Here.
Mr. Williams.
Yeah.
Mr. Robin.
Yeah.
Mr. Canoyer.
Here.
Mr. Hill.
Melvin.
And I am here. And I think I've got everyone. And would point out that ex officio member, First Selectman Amy St. Ange is here as well.
Yeah, and Paul Hopkins, the assessor, is also in the Zoom room for you guys who may have any questions.
Excellent, thank you. Item 2 is discussion of policy recommendation for town-owned parcels, former campground lots in the vicinity of Little Pond. And I know we've got the documents that Brian and some others worked on. And so if that's where we would like to start tonight, I think that would make sense.
Yeah, to be clear, I received no further questions. Oh, Randy's coming in too, by the way.
Excellent.
He's just coming in now. I received no further questions from any commission members, so there's no additional information that I looked up, pulled in. So I guess I would say I would recommend letting Brian lead off on this one. He's already got his hand up
And I was
anyway.
to say, I do see his hand up, so we can go there. I am on a handheld device, so to not give everyone seasickness, I'm going to turn my camera off. But Mr. Santos, take it away.
I just want to make sure I understand what the purpose of tonight is. Are we just further discussing our recommendation for these parcels of land for the selectmen, like how we want to sell them, if we want to sell them, like setting up that structure? Are we voting on that tonight? Are we just discussing the options? I just want to make
So you're in subcommittee, so you can't take action,
Mhm,
meaning you can
I
take
just-
no motions and votes.
Okay, I just wanted to verify that. Thank you.
Right, so my understanding of the discussion tonight versus the discussion you had last time.
Yeah.
And the way I wrote up the agenda, the last time you guys specifically discussed an 820, a statutory 824 recommendation for the two particular parcels, Woodland Ave number 5 and 6. And I think you guys discussed that pretty thoroughly. At the last regular meeting, I would say Jane in particular, but I think also other members of the commission seemed to want to develop a general policy for any 824 recommendations that come through for these specific parcels related to this old foreclosed campground from 1955. And there are dozens of them. I can pull the parcel map up and sort of zoom around the area and do a markup if you want, but there are enough of them that it seemed like you guys wanted to have a consistent thing that you were saying anytime these 824 recommendations came up. And I would say your choices are essentially between the town not selling them at all, selling them with a deed restriction or a conservation easement, and then another option, which I don't think is really on the table, but was suggested. So if you guys want to discuss it, I think it's fine. The town actually placing it in some kind of larger trust or conservation easement. And what I took your memo as doing was exploring some of the fiscal options there. And it was a great memo, and you and I passed it back and forth to Paul. So that's why I'm passing it off to you, brother.
Sure. Can I share my screen?
Yeah, let me give you the,
And while that's happening, we'll just recognize Mr. Blackmer is present as well. Good evening, Randy.
Good
post. Here we go. Share screen. You should be all set now, B.
Okay. What do you guys see?
We see your desktop with your document on it. Dear members.
All right, very good. Okay, so when I was researching this, guys, let me just narrow it down for you. I was looking for primarily two things. One, set up a document that the town can utilize, adjust, customize for each individual property, control it through the deed, and then it allows you to, here, I'll show you, like list permitted uses like recreational, bird watching, whatever we wanted to say, right? These were just examples, open space, agricultural. And then the second thing was that whatever that path is, it's the most financially advantageous path for us. So if we have this document in a deed restriction, we can utilize it over and over and over again. It's just up to us or the selectmen actually to decide on what those permitted uses are. So those were the two criteria that I was like focused in on. And then if I'm missing something, I'm all ears, and I'm actually, if Paul wants to weigh in here too, if I'm off base, those are the two things that I was really focused in on. So I did some research in the background about like some costs, just to give like conservation easement or deed restriction. This is what it would cost us. And we can have all this verified through some other person, but this is what I was finding. And when I wrote this memo was in support of a deed restriction, at least in my opinion, for everyone to like evaluate because of cost efficiency, administration simplicity, and then we have that local control, right? Because if we put it in a conservation commission, that's pretty limiting. And there's a lot of parcels of land over there. So I feel like we should want to be able to have that, that local control of each one of these. So that's what this memo is in short. I did draft, and obviously some other legal person would have to evaluate this. This was the full version of the deed restriction, and obviously there would have to be an attachment A with the parcel information, or exhibit A as I listed. And then I also did a shortened one, which is just a one pager. But I will leave that up to the legal team to decide which one is more effective. Let me just see here too. What else did I give here? I gave this one too. Yeah, this one. And I just did an evaluation of like those restrictions, restricting things like conservation is very strong, prohibits development subdivision. There's no real flexibility, but the enforcement is very strong, where a deed restriction has like, it's harder to monitor because it's through the deed, but the lawyers that sell these properties are legally bound to reviewing these things, as everybody knows. But over time, they could be challenged and changed in the future, but I think that's the risk that we just take. And then I was asking Paul about sale methods, but I think I'm beyond my pay grade with this. I'll let Amy and the selectmen decide, and Paul, on how to go about the sale stuff. But so those were my the two paths, and I'm in favor of the deed restriction. But I guess I'll open up the floor Unless Terry, you want to add anything, or Joe or Paul? Maybe we'd like to hear from Paul, actually, just to kind of, I know Paul's been looking at some stuff.
Yeah, and just since you asked, I do not have strong opinions here. I think that in the specific case of lots 5 and 6 off Woodland, almost any path you choose gets you to the same point, which is 2 parcels that will not be developed, particularly if you add a restricted covenant on the deed or an easement or whatever. The prospective buyer has already said that he doesn't want to develop it, and you have the mechanism to restrict that further. I do think there's some wisdom in this particular group of parcels because there are environmental sensitivities with the wetlands and the natural diversity database sensitivity to looking at them and developing a single policy. But based on your conversation at the last subcommittee meeting and the regular meeting, I personally would be comfortable with any path that you chose. And I see Paul's got his hand up.
Yeah, go ahead, Paul. Thanks.
Yeah, so the only thing I wanted to add, and Brian was right on this point, is if we go with the deed restriction, once we have the language in place, that's the only real cost to the town, other than maybe a final review by the attorney.
Yeah.
Because we can attach, we have the ability to find the Schedule A for each of these parcels, since it would be on the foreclosure document that was filed with the town clerk. So really, once we have the language written, there's very little additional cost from that deed restriction, whereas the conservation easement is more of a ongoing cost to the town, because we would have to do that for each individual parcel that we were going to sell. So the cost would just be an ongoing accumulative total until all the parcels were sold, or all that land was eventually dispersed.
Well, essentially, it's just taken away from the value of that we would sell it for, right? So anyway. Ray's got his hand up, Joe.
Thanks. Yeah, go ahead, Ray.
You guys keep talking about selling these parcels now. The one thing is selling that one lot with the deed restrictions. That's got to go through an auction. So, you know, it's not just turning it over to Mr. Jezierski. And the other thing, the rest of them parcels with the wetlands, with that being the top 10 notable, one of the notable water areas of Thompson, that's a 200-foot, not 100-foot setback from the wetlands. It's 200 feet. And if that was going into, the rest of it was going into a conservation easement, why are we talking about selling it further on down the road? That should be in an easement forever, not to be looking into selling it.
Thanks, Ray.
That's something I want, you know, that I would like to see that put into an Edward Babula. Edward Babula was one of the most prominent selectmen we ever had. He drove 3/4 of the kids around Thompson to back and forth to school. And then when the school when they didn't have nobody bus drivers after, when he was retired, he came out of retirement to drive kids, you know, either regular bus routes to field trips. I think it'd be really nice for his family to, and it abuts his property all the way from one end, almost all the way right to the other end, all them different parcels. There's like 4 different lots that abut that farm that could each be put into that. It wouldn't need to be surveyed. It wouldn't need to be policed, because the people down there have been policing that property for over 50 years already. Just, you know, that's my opinion.
So can I ask you a question about that, Ray? Since you mentioned putting it into a trust in this family's name, have they indicated interest to you that they want to form a land trust?
I didn't say put it in a trust in their name. I said put it in a conservation area in their name. There's no reason to put it in a trust because, you know, you try getting into Wyndham or any of the other ones, they want you to pay so many years of taxes. If we just, we're already not getting taxes on it. If we just put it in conservation area, at the Edward Babula Conservation Area, the same thing that the Thompson Rod and Gun did for the retired school teacher that just passed away for Phil Laval. We put 40 acres into the Laval Logie woodland area that's behind the Thompson Rod and Gun property. You know, it's pretty much the same thing.
Okay, I think I understand more what you're suggesting then. So, and let me know if this matches more what you have in mind. The town would retain ownership in this concept, and they would dedicate by name those properties to the Babula family. Is that what you're thinking?
100% correct.
Okay, all right. So I understand more what you've been suggesting then. I all this time thought you were suggesting somebody forming a trust. So, okay, I'm glad you
Way
clarified.
back.
Go ahead, Paul.
As the assessor, the only thing I would add to that conversation is that, you know, currently being owned by the town collects no revenue from those parcels. And if we did do a sale with some type of conservation easement, there would be some revenue stream coming in.
And Ray, why do you say
Thank
that
you.
one piece of property has to go by public auction? Why is that? Why is that limiting to that?
Because that it's supposed to go through public auction.
Yeah,
Any
Yeah,
town
yeah.
land that's sold is supposed to go through public auction.
I'm not.
yes,
I'm-
he's correct, Brian, that
That's
it's a
what it is.
sealed bid, a sealed bid auction
yeah,
that has to be
I mean,
publicly noticed.
These are what I think the three options are.
A private sale, the town has done that before. People, it ended up going to people in the town that sold it to their friends and their family. So the private sale should not even be on there. That shouldn't even be on there. We've had that happen in the town. People in the town, Paul, years ago, you go through IQS and you start following deeds, you're gonna see whose names. I'm not throwing names out there, but there are people that's been in our town and they did very shady stuff doing private bids. And sealed bids, I don't even think there should be sealed bids. Everything should go under a public auction where you can sit there, put your hand up and I want it, you want it, you want it. How are you gonna, you do a sealed bid, the same thing. If that's not opened up in public, how do you know you can trust who's opening up them bids?
I believe it is an open public bid, but I just don't want it. I'm challenging the thought process on that it has to be public auction. That's not the case.
Tira,
Yes?
the attorney weighed in on that, right? Didn't we ask him about that early on in this?
I think we did, but actually I think Amy's in the best position to answer what the process is. My understanding, and I may be incorrect, but my understanding of the 824 process is that it is published to receive sealed bids
And I
as
see,
as distinct from the tax sale auction process. I
And-
could be wrong about that, but that is my understanding, and Amy is in, she can clarify.
yeah, and she's unmuted. I see that.
I
so-
didn't, hi, everybody. So there is an ordinance, 102-1, authority to sell, lease, or dispose of property. Any real estate having a fair market value in excess of $1,000 shall be disposed of without, shall not be disposed of without the advice and consent of the Town Planning and Zoning Commission. And then in those situations where the Planning and Zoning Commission approves disposition and it is proposed to permanently transfer such real estate property, the select person shall publish a notice soliciting bids for any proposed sales. The bids are sent, remain sealed, and they are opened at a Board of Selectmen meeting
Okay.
publicly.
Thank you, Amy.
And that's how we've done it in the past.
Thank you.
Ray's got his hand up, Joe, again.
Thank you. I'm having a hard time looking at the screen and looking at the hand, so I appreciate that. Go
Yeah,
ahead, Ray.
No problem.
My computer just kicked me out for a minute, so I just missed about 3/4 of what Amy said. And when it came back on, I was complaining about the internet, so I don't know if anybody heard some of the words I was saying.
Well, we
But,
missed those, Ray, but can you repeat those real quick?
I really don't think I should, but like I said, I did miss out on that, on most of what she said. I caught the very end about it opening up, but I do know there was we do have an ordinance on selling town
Right.
property, so
Right.
I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah,
was
exactly.
Sealed bids, right?
Yeah, Ray, that's exactly what, yeah, to summarize, she read the ordinance and they call for bids, sealed bids are opened at a Board of Selectmen meeting. So that's the process, according to town ordinance.
Okay, so it's a town ordinance, so I think that's an ordinance that should be changed. I think there should be an auction when people gotta sit there and one person bids, another person bids. For one thing, you'd get more revenue on for people that want to buy the lots.
So well, I'll forward you to the ordinance committee on that one, Ray.
Excuse me?
I said I'll forward you to the ordinance committee on that one.
Yeah, but that's out of the realm of what we're talking about anyway.
Right, right.
Exactly. You're right.
You know me, if it's on my mind, it usually comes out. So I'm gonna say
anyone else?
Well, I'll stop sharing now because I think everyone's got the picture here.
Great. Go ahead, Jane.
Okay, the reason why I wanted this was clarification, and I'm getting bits and, a little bit here and a little bit there. All right, if we were to put this into conservation, most of the land, I mean, I know there are some lots that are basically landlocked. They're not near the, the water areas. When you say that we need to have surveying done, does that fall into that category if we put it into conservation?
Jane, who's that question for?
Anybody, whether it would be Paul or Amy or anybody that has any thoughts on that.
Yeah,
After walking, spending 2 hours out there and then looking at some of the overhead maps of that area, I was really surprised at all the wetlands that are in there. And I don't, my thoughts, and I said it at our last regular meeting, that I'd like to see it go into conservation. So I need to know a little bit more clarification on what involves putting it into conservation.
and I'll say this is Paul. Typically, you would want to do a survey and have a soil scientist do an analysis of the soil as well as the animal life that's in the area, because some areas are protected under the animal conservation rules. So I think the cost would be relatively high in that case, because you would want to do those things to make sure that the conservation easement is properly detailed.
So
Okay.
I'm just putting up on the screen for you. And let me be clear, this is not all of the campground parcels that were foreclosed on in 1955, but this is the largest chunk in the area related to lots 5 and 6. So here's Jezierski's property, here's lot 5, here's lot 6. The vast bulk of these are still town owned. Some of them are privately owned. This pink is the wetlands profile that shows in the parcel map. And as Paul points out, to be really precise, it would need to be surveyed and a soil scientist. And then the other really significant piece is if you toss on the natural resource protection layer in parcel maps, all of this cross-hatched black and white indicates that there are natural diversity database implications for this whole area, and that goes down. It doesn't quite hit all of the foreclosed campground parcels in this particular block, if you want to call it that. But then if you go down all these little blocks, not all of them, some of them, it's a mix of town-owned and privately owned, but it goes, there's parcels all the way down here. What we cannot know without pulling a report is what the specific species are. They could be spotted salamanders, they could be long-eared bats, where there are streams or where there's actual bodies of water, could be freshwater mussels. I don't know enough, and the CTD purposefully doesn't publish the full inventory of species in question because they don't want people to go prospecting for them. But it was obviously a significant portion of all the properties. And again, this is the area we've been talking about. I think this must be one of the old Babula properties that Ray keeps talking about. The person who owns it now is named Nancy Thomas, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was a member of the family. That abuts all the parcels. Not sure what this one is here, but this is obviously Babula Road. So that's sort of the profile of the area.
Joe, may I speak?
No.
Sorry, I forgot I was muted. Yeah, go ahead, Jane.
Oh, okay, all right. Yeah, at first I thought I heard the word no, and I'm like, okay, I'll wait. Yeah. All right, so if this were to become the Thompson Conservation Area, then we would have to do the survey and everything else that Paul was alluding to, correct?
Yes, there would be costs associated with surveying. There would be legal costs to put it in permanent easement.
But okay, my question is, the town already owns the property, correct?
Correct.
All right, we can't just say this is going to be the Thompson Conservation Area and just leave it as is and just name it that, and that no building my concerns are, I don't want to see anything built in there. So if we put it into the Thompson Conservation Area, open for, like Brian had put up, bird watching, things like that, trails, to have Thompson, since we already own the property, why can't it be designated Thompson Conservation Area?
So
Has
my
no legal
understanding
grounds.
of this.
I'm sorry?
It has no legal grounds. You can't just call it something. There's no legality to it.
Well, I mean, it would have to go to a vote on the town, on the town side. It would have to go to a townwide vote on that. But that, in my mind, and I could be totally wrong because I don't know anything about this stuff. That's why I wanted this meeting. If we own the property, why can't we name it the Thompson Conservation, put it to a town meeting and have it voted on?
Right. So what I think Brian was getting at there is you can name anything informally. In order for that protection to be permanent, that an actual legal restriction needs to be placed on it. Right now, it's sort of protected by neglect. Nobody's maintaining it. Nobody's monitoring it. It's just there.
And that I would see continuing, because it is beautiful land in there. And when I walked it, I mean the tracks that were through many places, there's an awful lot of animals that are going through there, all different kinds. But that's something that I would like to see. And to go back to what, Ray was saying, making it Babola, what I'm trying to come up with is the best way to conserve this land with the least amount of cash flow out going ahead to do this.
Sure, I understand your point, but just to put it in a different perspective, I guess. So I think everybody here tonight more or less agrees that somehow we want this area to be largely undeveloped or completely undeveloped, and we're discussing the best method. 50 years from now, if a permanent legal protection, which would be an easement or some other form of legally described description, is not placed on this property, then there's nothing that prevents a future Board of Selectmen from saying, you know what, let's sell it off after all.
No,
So
yeah.
the easement, and not just the naming, right? And I understand, you know, name, dedicate it, name it, but without defining the legal parameters, right? The legal boundaries of the entire section that you want to preserve, right? Because again, remember, this was all one huge campground. There's these parcels, there's these parcels, there's these parcels. What is the limit of, like, these don't abut that former Babula property as far as I can tell. They're sprinkled in. Some of them are privately owned, some of them are publicly owned through foreclosure. When it was originally created, they were supposed to be campground parcels. So somebody could easily make a case, well, maybe I want to come in and buy it and make them campgrounds. And a future Board of Selectmen could be sympathetic to that. So the mechanism for, you have a couple of mechanisms for actual permanent protection. One is publicly owned and conservation easement. The other is you have the option of privately selling and putting legal deed restrictions on. I think that's the piece that Brian is advocating for. I would say Paul is mildly advocating for that. Those are permanent protections. The town continuing to own it is not inherently a permanent protection.
No, I do understand that. I know 50
Okay.
years from now, somebody can come in and say, ah, no, let's do this anyway. I guess one of the things I'd like to know would be what would be the actual cost to put it into a conservation easement. So that so I've got an idea of what that is going to cost. My concerns are that if people, if we go to the public auction and the sealed bids, they own the property, then they can actually, you know, and I know deed restrictions and everything else, but we all know that people have a tendency to do, and I'm all for it. If you own property, you should be able to do what you want on the property that you own. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to conserve this land at a cost that is not going to be huge to the town, and being able to put that in so that 50 years from now, some selectmen cannot reverse it. That's what I'm looking at.
I gave you those costs.
And are these, I mean, this is the conservation, is that, okay, Brian, let me ask you this, the easement, the surveying, $20,000 to $50,000, that's a big range. I guess I'm looking for more exact figures, but I can work with those.
I'll speak in the order of the hands. I know Ray's got his hand up, and Paul. I don't know who was first. So I don't want to.
I think it was Jane, Ray, Brian, and then Paul. They kind of show up in order on my thumbnail.
I'll just go with that. Go ahead, Ray.
We keep saying surveying. This property was already surveyed. This should be able to be put into a conservation easement with just the lot numbers. It should not have to be resurveyed. I've looked up conservation towns putting property into conservation easements, and it says right on when you look it up that it does not have to be surveyed. So that's a fee that does not have to be put in. Another thing is, I've been looking at these deeds. I've been back to deeds from 1906, and it was never put together as a campground. This was put together to be sold as house lots. And if you read the old deeds, it actually says that. It said people have been putting stuff down there. You know, the woman that put the foundation in, and then she came to us for the building. and which we asked for the permeability on the property, which we never got. Stuff haven't even been being policed lately, never mind, years ago. But the people that live down there, I think I just heard somebody say something about the place hasn't been being policed. The people that live down there have been policing that property, keeping people out of them lots for years and years. And another thing, for selling them lots, if them are private roads down there, how can the town give permission to people to go on private roads when they don't own the roads? I don't understand that.
Okay, so I'll go. I just want to regroup our thoughts here. The selectmen have asked us, at least in my opinion, if they were to sell a piece of property here, what path would we choose? If like with the Babulas or whatever that family was that you mentioned, Ray,
Mhm.
the selectmen still, based on that ordinance that Amy read, they have to come to us and get a recommendation. So on those properties, I say we just don't do anything. Right. And it sounds like you wanted to put them in the conservation, but there's many other properties over there that
Correct.
aren't sellable.
I got a map of the whole development, the whole from one end to the other. It's all circled. I got every one that the town owns circled on that development, and I think and then I have my opinion on which ones I think should be sold and not sold, and what should be put into a conservation easement. The old sand pit down on one end, we have the snapping turtle's been laying eggs in that sand pit for years. That's conservation. I called our wetlands and conservation twice in the last week trying to get that, to try to get this stuff looked at, but I haven't got a phone call back. And there's fairy shrimp in there. I got pictures of fairy shrimp in the water. I got pictures of spotted salmon. I've been walking these pieces for the last few weeks, a couple times a week to look at what's going through there. The deer tracks, coyote tracks, down in that sand pit area. So there's 3 areas there that I think should go into this conservation easement myself. But to get back to it, I think that to get back to what this all started with was them 2 lots. If we're going to go, that should be a bid for anybody that wants to put into it, to get back to what you said about getting back to what the selectman was looking for.
Yeah, I think they're just looking for consistency in this area, and that doesn't mean that eventually in some time in the future that we can't say, Ray, all right, and take all these lots and now we want them in the conservation. I guess my general point is that will cost the town more money to do that process. Some figure, I'm not going to say it's 20 or 50, it's some figure that's larger than a deed restriction. Okay. And that's my general point. I just feel like the selectmen are looking for us to make a decision about a few properties. I'll just say a few properties now to be able to move forward with something, to possibly collect tax revenue and all these other things. I just don't want it to be swallowed up, that decision process swallowed up with, oh, we need to do this large conservation land configuration or whatever process. I feel like it's going to get swallowed up with that. But Amy can correct me if I'm wrong in my statement, if that's what you're looking to do, is come up with consistency. That's all.
So just in terms of hands up, I had Brian, Paul, and then Jane.
So my only addition to that, going back to Brian's point, if you get the language done for the 2 parcels that are actually in question, and then you deal with the larger group, what you could do is take the language the easement language that's put for those 2 parcels, and then the town in and of itself can just put that easement across the rest of the parcels. And once the easement's recorded, it's a perpetuity situation. So, whether the properties are sold now or 50 years from now or 100 years from now, that easement will go along through perpetuity. So you could legally put some type of covenant on the property so that way it's there for conservation. And by doing that, you prevent any future development. But you could do that right now. The town just files a deed putting a covenant on all the parcels that they own in there, and that would take care of the entire situation going forward.
I have Jane next. Jane, you're on mute.
Yep, I am. Okay, I like what Paul just said. With thoughts, because this is town owned, and this, I guess, would go to Amy. Would there be something where the town would vote on this? That it would be put to the voters to see what they would want?
If I'm only looking at the ordinance in regard to the sale, lease, or disposal of property, the approval of the voters at a town meeting will be required to override the recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Commission in approving or denying proposed disposition. So that's the only thing that's addressed within the ordinance, is if the public wanted to dispute whatever the Planning and Zoning Commission, however you weighed in on this.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'll apologize first of all for not putting my hand up. I haven't got that mastered yet, but our charge for immediately is what we want to do as far as these two parcels that are on Woodland Ave that are abutting the property of the person that owns the property next to it that wants to buy this. As far as all the other conversation, I think that needs more work than we're going to do tonight. I'd like to see Ray's maps with how the land lays out and how much of it is wetlands, and the wetlands issue itself may take care of a lot of that land that people couldn't do anything with it if they wanted. And so my thought is that we should just go back to lots 5 and 6 that we were talking about at the P&Z meeting and decide whether we want to allow that person to buy those two parcels, or he owns the land abutting it. And those two parcels, according to the maps I saw at the meeting, were not in wetlands. And personally, I have no objection to letting that person bid on those. Those were the only two parcels that that we needed to make a decision on tonight. And I think Ray's idea of making that into some kind of a parcel honoring Ed Babula is a good one, but and I'd be in favor of that. But I think that we need to be able to study the maps more, and so that we find out how much is wetlands and if there's any parcels that we want to not impose on people that own property already on decent land. If it's wetlands, we'd have to make a decision whether we want to try and include that into what Ray's talking about. And that if it's wetlands, it makes it a whole lot easier. They're not going to build on it, or it's really going to limit anything they could do besides walk on it. So I think that our discussion should go back to lots 5 and 6 for tonight.
Amy's got her hand up next.
Yeah, so just to give you guys the heads up that I've been patiently waiting to see what your thoughts would be on these parcels, only because we have another resident of the lake that has requested the purchase of one of the parcels. Because he's been maintaining it since he purchased the home, I think it was 3 years ago, and he just realized it wasn't his property. So we do have another request for a purchase of one of these parcels that abut an owner. So just letting you know that there's another one that I'm sitting on.
Is
Do
that
you
in
know,
wetlands
do you
or?
know which one it is off the top of your head, Amy?
Unfortunately, I do not off the top of my heads though, so.
So again, to go back to what we started the meeting with, and I take Randy's point. You guys did discuss 5 and 6 a lot. And I think the reason we all thought this meeting would be favorable was to come up with a unified policy for lots in this area. Which does seem to have some wisdom since they have similar constraints between the wetlands and the NDDB implications. You're not really required to do that for the 824 referral. The 824 referral is a specific action tied to statute when requests come for disposal of town property. So that would bring it back to 5 and 6 and maybe this other lot. And for 5 and 6, the 824 referral, if I understand the statute correctly, your decision is more specifically prescriptive for the Board of Selectmen. In other words, if you recommend no sale, I think that's when they would have to go to town meeting to override your recommendation. For the larger policy, for the grouping of those lots, there's no specific statutory requirement. It would be advisory only, and the selectmen could choose to accept or discard that recommendation. That is my understanding. But for 5 and 6 and whatever this other mystery parcel is, your role is specific. If that makes sense for you guys.
Joe, can I speak?
Yes, yeah, go ahead, Jane.
Okay, so if I get this clear, we're looking at 5 and 6, which is Jezerski's abutting 2 lots. What we've been discussing, yes, he wants to buy it, but what we have been discussing, that this would go out to a bid, correct?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so, which basically falls in line with all the other things if that is the avenue we're gonna take. So he can't just outright buy them from the town, it would have to go to bid. So what I'm looking at is, are we gonna be doing lot by lot by lot? And we haven't even really decided what we wanna do with this area. Because that is gonna have to go to bid.
Well,
Right,
Amy
right.
threw
There's
another
there's
curve
two
into the thing with,
questions.
Amy threw another curveball into this with a third parcel, but Jezerski owns lots 1, 2, 3, 4, and wanted to buy 5 and 6, which all abut his property that he already owns, and it's not in wetlands. And without knowing which lot Amy's talking about, I think we could make a decision on this, but on these 2 lots, based on it's not in wetlands and that they abut all of the other lots that are there, and put off making a decision. Or I'd like to see Ray's map on how many of those 100 lots are in wetlands, because as far as I'm concerned, the land that's in wetlands is a real easy decision to, you're not taking it away from somebody because they can't do anything with it if they had it. And how many lots are not in wetlands that people own, and so there'd be a challenge that we're putting deed restrictions on their land without their permission.
You'll notice that I'm selecting some of these lots. Another thing that I keep meaning to mention is if Jezerski purchases these two lots, they essentially landlock all the lots behind it in the stack.
They're all in wetlands too.
And they're all in wetlands, because this Genesic across woodland, I guess that should be woodland, it says Woodside, owns a few, and then behind them, they become town-owned lots in wetlands. So I think almost any way you slice it, the sale of 5 and 6 does not put the lots behind them, which are still town-owned, or across from them at any further risk of development. That's not necessarily true as you get further down into the existing lots, but for these particular two lots, and particularly if the town makes explicitly clear that they would be imposing a deed restriction on development, which was a concern that you guys raised at the last meeting, right? Not wanting this to be combined into a building lot that gets then sold for future development. You have the option of recommending to the selectmen that they dispose of these two lots with a deed restriction against future development as one combined building lot. Now, that piece of the recommendation, I believe, but we would have to check with the attorney, the Board of Selectmen could take or leave, but you certainly have the option to recommend. And I see Ray's got his hand up next.
If somebody else is looking at a lot and asking for that, and there's a few other lots that are all by themselves. You know, before we jump to this, should we look at all these single lots that are around, and if we're going to do an auction, do them all at once?
We're gonna do the auction before 2040, or you have to notify I guess, everyone in town that there's gonna be a public auction if they want to put their name on a certain
Correct.
lot.
But the only thing with that too, though, is on private roads down there, the deeds say that the people down there have the right to use the roads. If them are private roads, nobody else has got the right to use these roads anyway.
And it is a good point, Ray.
And they're just paper roads. There's no, with the exception of Center Street and Jezerski Lane, I don't think any of those other roads are paved, or may not even.
But in the deeds, it says all roads and ways. Them paper roads are ways.
Right, so anybody who buys into that gets the
Excuse
use
me?
of it.
Go ahead, Paul.
I've been reading these deeds pretty extensively, almost every lot down there, and all the old deeds. Like I say, a lot of stuff that's going on down all over town. We don't even look at that, and I shouldn't even be bringing this up right now, but we don't even look at deeds. Half of the farms in town probably have stuff in their deeds saying they shouldn't be developed, you know, and we don't even look at that. Nobody looks at the deeds. But in the deeds for these lots down here, it says you have the rights for all roads and ways.
So you guys have been in for just about an hour. We've set aside 2, and I'm happy to give it to you. I guess I would pose the question to you. And Randy has said he wants to bring the focus back to lots 5 and 6. I would pose the question to you as a group. If you want to continue with this subcommittee meeting under the original stated purpose, which was to develop a unified policy for 824 referrals in this area, meaning anybody like Jezierski who comes and says, hey, I'm in a butter and I would like to have the opportunity to purchase this from the town. We turn around and say, well, the standards are this, right? It's got to go to a sealed bid. That's all part of the statute. But in addition to the statutory requirements in this area, the town is either going to impose a deed restriction or we've imposed a conservation easement over the entire area. You need to be aware of that. In my mind, that was what you guys were coming together to discuss and then potentially take action on at your next regular meeting. Is that still what you're intending to do tonight in this second hour? Jane, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, with what Randy was saying, and of course with what Ray is saying, 5 and 6, I understand that aspect of it. I know Jezierski wants to buy those 2 lands, lot 5 and 6. I'm against doing that right now because we haven't even got anything into play as to how we're going to deal with all of this. So if we do something with 5 and 6, somebody and then check and make small changes, somebody's going to say, hey, wait a minute, you allowed this on 5 and 6. I don't think we're there yet to even tell Jezierski anything. We need to sit down with the maps that Ray has, like Randy asked for, and have a face-to-face subcommittee meeting to really look at these maps and have a much better picture of what we're going to do, because I don't want to do it piece by piece. And that's what we're starting to do. So in conjunction with what Randy said and Ray said, I don't think we're there yet to do anything with Jezierski's lots that he wants to buy. We need to get something as a whole done so that everybody is being taken care of the same way. And in order to do that, we need to look at some more maps. And those are my thoughts.
Paul, I see your hand next.
So I have a copy of the maps that Ray's talking about in the office. I could scan the images in and email it to everybody on the commission.
That would be fantastically helpful, Paul. Thank you.
But I really do think that we need to have at least another subcommittee meeting on this, and I would like to see it maybe face to face, so that we actually have the hard copies of the maps in front of us, so that we get a better picture of this. Like I said, I don't want to do something piece by piece. And if we do Jezierski, that's going to start piece by piece. I mean, we're in no rush to do this. This is not something that we have a time schedule on. So I think that maybe if we sit down, have better maps, really look at this, and have a better idea of what everything is in there, not just these 2 lots. That's doing piece by piece, and I don't want to see that happen.
I would also like to see the commission take a walk on these down through there, so everybody can see how much water there is, how much in the sand pit, you know, when it rains real hard, the water sits in there for weeks sometimes. You know, there's the town years ago, that's where the town got all the sand years ago for the roads. And they dug it so deep in there, you know, it's almost down to the water level in the ponds. And when I was a kid, all summer long, that's what the town trucks did. They just hauled the dirt out of there and over to the town garage. And you know, I think that, you know, here we are, everybody's sitting here talking about it, but nobody's you know, I don't know if anybody else has been out there. I know I've been out there. I've lived in the town for 53, 54 years, and I played in them pits, years ago, and been through all them woods my whole life. So, so I know what them woods are like, and I'd like other people to see the conditions of the woods and the mud and what's there for wildlife.
Yeah, I've never been on any of the land that you're looking at. I've been on the fields that were behind the barn, but that was just all open fields, and you can see houses right over the wall. But that's what we need to know, is whose land is possible that we're talking about, and without maps and Paul's wisdom, we can talk till we're blue in the face and we won't come to any conclusion.
I agree that I think we should all do a walkthrough to get a better idea of what is in there, because what I saw when I spent 2 hours in there, and I only saw part of it. We really need to do more before we even begin to come up with a decision as to how we are going to do this, to make an educated decision. Right now, like Randy said, we can talk to it until the cows come home. We need a lot more information on this before we make any decisions. And I, for one, I would like to see all of us go through and walk these lands, these parcels, because that would give us a better idea of what we are dealing with, who is abutting what, and what, it is something that needs to be done before we make any decisions.
I see Joe's got his hand up next, and before you say anything, Joe, let me just say, JBL did come into the meeting probably about 10 minutes ago. Call it, for the sake of the minutes, call it
Great.
7:50.
Thank you, Tira. So I have, in principle, I agree that I think this process is really important, and I think I'm very appreciative of the thoughtful and intentional way we are going through this process, and do want to make sure that we have a unified decision-making standard for parcels in this area. I am concerned. I have questions that I don't know the answers to. So I want to be respectful to Mr. Jezierski, who has made this application to the town, or made this request to the town, and want to get him some sort of answer in a fairly timely manner, right? Our next meeting will be the third meeting that this has appeared on the agenda, and I do want to make sure we are doing right by him, which doesn't necessarily mean he gets the outcome he wants per se, but that he knows what's going on. So I guess one of my questions is, can the town request an 824 advice and consent from the Planning and Zoning Commission for the same parcel, right? If we do take a vote in May and the vote is no, is there a point where the selectmen can come back with this request, I guess, is one of my questions. And then I guess the more salient question is, is Mr. Jezierski looking for an answer for this in any certain time frame? And I think he deserves the respect of an answer at some point soon. And that's why I would potentially advocate acting on lots 5 and 6 and simultaneously continuing this conversation about the other lots in this area.
Just for whatever it's worth, and then I see Ray and Jane. I will make this observation about the last subcommittee meeting when Mr. Jezierski was in with us. It doesn't seem like he is in a particular hurry, A, and B, I think he was surprised to discover that this process was so involved. As you may recall, he mentioned that the town had approached him to buy them years ago, and he had passed on it, and it was only his wife's current interest in expanding a garden or something along those lines that that had him revive it. I don't think he was anticipating that the process was this complex. Now, that doesn't mean that he hasn't in the meantime decided he is in a hurry, but my impression is that he is not. Um, but I obviously don't have the specific answer to that any more than any of you. Ray and then Jane.
Well, that was the first thing I was gonna say, because he was saying that he didn't realize it was gonna be that much of a rabbit hole. And the second thing I was gonna say, when you brought up Nancy Thomas, that is Nancy, Thomas is her married name. It is Nancy Babula.
Yeah, I figured that was the case, Ray, because you were consistently referring it to as the Babula property, but the name, the ownership name is definitely under Thomas. So thank you for the clarification.
I knew her before she was Thomas, so.
That's Ed's daughter, right? Thomas is,
Yes, Eddie's daughter.
and I'm not sure, is there any other Babulas left over there? I know Willie passed away years ago, and
Yeah, Johnny passed away too, and quite a few years back. So yes, she is the only the only one, and she lives out towards Tolland, somewhere out that way. Not that that matters, but she doesn't live there. She rents the house out and then lets them cut hay on to pay her taxes. She lets a few neighborhood farmers.
Jane's got her hand up too.
Okay, so I understand what Joe was saying. I did not get the impression that he was in any type of a huge rush. The land isn't going to go anywhere. I really would like us to set up a walkthrough so that we all can go look more in depth at what's there. And again, I'll reiterate, I don't want to do this piecemeal by piecemeal. If we allow something to happen with Jezerski, then whatever we do with him, we've got to do with everybody else. And we're not even close to that yet. So I think the first thing that we should do, one, we can let Mr. Jezerski know that this is a much more involved process than actually any of us thought. And two, that we want to do a walkthrough. That will give us an idea, a better idea, and then sit down and look at the maps, which will be much clearer to us because we have walked it. So that my suggestion is that we set up a walkthrough so that we can, or at least a good portion of us can go through this walkthrough, then have another subcommittee face-to-face meeting and be able to pull out the maps that Ray has and Paul has, so that we have a better idea of what we are looking at before we make any kind of a decision. I don't want to put something into play with one individual and then discover that we shouldn't have done that. So we're not even close to being able to tell Mr. Jezerski, yeah, it's going to go out to bid. We need to do more work on this. So if we could set up a walkthrough, that would be the first step, a walkthrough with this property.
It's certainly, you certainly have the ability as a commission to call for a site walk. Now, I don't know the last time the Planning and Zoning Commission organized a site walk of their own. Certainly it has not been in the last 6 years or 7 years. Just for whatever it's worth, and this is just to let you know, a site walk is the same as any other public meeting. It's got to be noticed. Minutes have to be kept. I would have to talk with, I would have to talk with Cindy on how she would want to handle that from a staffing.
I mean, now I agree. This would have to be posted. We would have to have minutes. We'll be able to figure that out, how we would do that. One person would be designated to, say, okay, we're here, blah, blah, blah. It's a little bit extra, but it's not a biggie. We need to go through this property before we do anything on it. So setting up the walkthrough and having the minutes and everything else done, we could manage that.
Yeah, it can definitely be done. I just wanted to clarify that it's not just a walkthrough. It does have to be
it's a meeting recorded. Is what it is. It is a meeting and it has to follow the rules of our bylaws as far as meetings go and ordinances and everything else. So I don't think it's a bump in the road. It's not anything big. We would be able to do it. But I for one feel strongly that we need to do more on this.
Anybody else have anything else that they want to cover in this subcommittee meeting on this topic?
I'd say
I-
before we go on a site walk, I would like to see Ray's maps that he had so that I have a better idea where I'm walking when we do that. I think the site walk would be appropriate. The last site walk that we went on, I think, was when French River Materials was in the process of getting going down there. P&Z had a walk there. I don't know whether that was an official one or not.
Yes, it was.
Randy?
So, Ray, you have those maps and I think Paul
They're
said that
right
he
in-
has copies of them as well, right?
I have
Mine are
copies.
right- Mine are right in front of me right now, and if Randy wants, I could take a ride over to his house Saturday morning and we could go over them.
Well, what I was going to suggest is, I mean, we've been doing this in subcommittee because, you know, it's discussion without action. If the May meeting is light, there's no reason that you guys can't have that as an agenda item to look at those maps in that meeting where you're already going to be seeing each other in person. It'll save you having an extra meeting in addition to the extra site walk. I think that's absolutely fine. I will say this, I think you guys know I'm out next week. And then when I come back on Monday, that's your regular meeting. So if you guys want to decide tonight that you want it on your agenda for May, tomorrow before I leave, I can send a message to Cindy, you know, an email to Cindy, because she's not in tomorrow, to make sure that that gets on the agenda for May. That's fine. And then-
I agree
And then
with
Paul
that.
can
yeah.
get the maps to Cindy to include in your packets.
And I think
I-
that's a good idea, and then we can schedule a special meeting site walk at that May meeting potentially.
Yeah, and that's what I was gonna suggest, that we have the maps at the May meeting. So we will have them in our hands. We set up a date that night. We will all be able to take the maps home, look at them, and that on our May meeting, we set up the date for the walkthrough. Then we will have a much better idea and be able to take action on this and which way we're going. So putting it on the agenda would be a good idea.
Yep, that should be easy enough. Ray, you're next.
So that just puts us back to June for a vote. And we still got to talk about the way, well, to Brian's point before, we still got to come up with how we're gonna handle the sales. The sales of the lots, if it's a bid or however with some of the processes that he had outlined. So so if we can handle that at the May meeting and then come up to the June meeting to vote on what we're gonna do.
Well,
If your agenda is light enough, there's no reason that you can't discuss that as well on the agenda. Joe might want to confer with Cindy as to how much is going to be on. I am not totally aware of what she's sitting on for the May agenda. I don't think there is much. It could be that you have a huge chunk of time in the regular meeting to discuss it. That would work out well for you guys. If it turns out that there is more than I think there is for the regular agenda in May, you always have the option, in addition to the site walk, of scheduling another subcommittee meeting to discuss. I do think that Mr. Jezierski is not in any hurry. I don't know about this additional person Amy was referencing. Might be worth asking Amy if she feels there's any sense of urgency to this. I don't get that impression, but you know, that's just an impression.
Well, it needs to be on the agenda. We will have the maps at our next regular meeting. We will schedule the walkthrough. Then we can have another subcommittee meeting, face-to-face subcommittee meeting before our June meeting, and we should be able to finish it up at the June meeting. So the maps at our next regular meeting, we set up the walkthrough, then we have another subcommittee meeting or as needed before the June meeting, and we should be good to go with that. As far as, you know, worrying about whether these people are in a hurry, we don't need to be, you know, we're not going to take a year to do this. Obviously, it's going to get taken care of within the next 5-6 weeks. But we have to be able to do this right. So for me, on the agenda, set up the walkthrough, set up another subcommittee meeting, and that should put us right on track to being done with this at the June meeting.
That all sounds reasonable to me, Jane.
Okay. And I think for me, that is the most educated way to do it. I'm not worried about the people that want to buy these lots, because we have to do this right so that nothing happens down the road and somebody comes, and so it doesn't bite us in the butt on the backside.
Sure. All right, well, so we are at a little past 8:15. I think that you guys have established a short-term path forward. I am happy to stay on here if there is more that you guys want to specifically discuss about this issue, but I feel like you're at an impasse until some of these other things you know, come up at the
Yeah.
regular meeting and the special meetings in June.
Tira, yeah, if I may, Tira.
Please.
Yeah, I think that's it, right? I think we've got a good way forward. Jane, I agree with you completely. I mean, I think if the people are buying these with the goal of not developing them, then there is no particular rush, right? Not developing quickly is just as good as not developing in the long run. So I think we've got a good way forward, and I think other than that, we're just spinning our wheels.
Yeah, we've got our course of action is what we have. So we'll just stay on the course.
So if there's no objection, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Just one thing before you do that, I think it'd be
Yes.
appropriate for somebody to contact Mr. Jezierski and let him know what we're doing so that he doesn't think that we swept him under the rug.
Hey.
And the other thing is, Brian, you did a super job on what you put together. I'm really impressed with it, and I want to commend you on the job you did.
Yeah, thank you, Randy. Those are two really good points. And I'm grateful to you for bringing them up. And as I said earlier, I am really happy with the thoughtful process that we're taking on this, because I do think it's important. It's an important piece of our town, and this is what we're here for. So I just wanted to say that as well.
All right, I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Actually,
Is there a
before you finish that, so Amy, can we ask you to reach out to Mr. Jezierski and just give him that update?
Yep, I had unmuted myself. I was going to say that. So yes, I'm absolutely happy to reach out to Mr. Jezierski. I'll do
Thanks.
that. I'll do that tomorrow.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Salsi has moved to adjourn. Is there a second?
I'll second, and I'll say thank you to Randy.
Mr. Santos seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The meeting is adjourned at 8:20 p.m. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Good
I'll
night,
see you
all.
guys when I get back from vacation.
Have
Have
fun.
a good one.